Our word of the week this week is enkopto. Enkopto is a verb and it means I thwart or I hinder. It's an interesting word in that it comes from a military practice of digging trenches across streets or roads to slow down the progress of your enemies. And built into that, because it's a slowing down of progress, built into that is the notion that this is a temporary stalling tactic. So this isn't something that's necessarily going to prevent you from doing something. It's going to temporarily prevent you from doing something. It's going to hinder your progress. So in the New Testament, the verb is always thwarting something or someone in kind of a religious context. And we can look at it as dealing with two questions. What's being hindered? Is it a person? Is it their effort? Is it the gospel being hindered? Is it prayer? What is it that's being hindered? And then the second question is by whom? Generally, we see it either attributed to Satan or to the hearts of men, that there's something happening with people that's hindering someone or something from happening. So let's dive right in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 17 through 18. This is from the ESV with the Koine supplied, where we read, "But since we were torn away from you, brothers, for a short time, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because we wanted to come to you. I, Paul, again and again. But Satan hindered us." And hindered here is enekopson. Enekopson is an aorist, active indicative, third person singular of enkopto. So Paul desired to visit and to minister to the Thessalonians, and he believed himself to be hindered by Satan himself. Satan was hindering our efforts to go and see you. If you want to see a very similar passage, look at Romans chapter 15, verse 22, and you'll see Paul tell the Roman Christians something very similar. Let's move on and go to Galatians chapter 5, verses 7 through 8. "You were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth?" And hindered here is enekopson, just like the previous verse. "This persuasion is not from him who calls you." So now Paul alludes either to Satan or to people who are working in a diabolical manner to persuade the Galatian Christians to follow a path other than the one to which they were called. And that's a major theme of the letter to the Galatians. You were on track, but so quickly you fell away. You followed off after foolishness. "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" So there are people who are influencing them, and you can sort of read into it whether or not it is a satanic influence or the satanic influence through other people, or just other people's influence that's causing the Galatians to stumble. Now we're going to look at an interesting one where there's an effort to derail the gospel by derailing Paul, and this is from a man named Tertullus giving testimony. And our word of the week in this verse is used by Tertullus to gain himself an opportunity to testify against Paul. This is Acts chapter 24, verses 4 and 5. "But to detain you no further," and detain is enkopto, "I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly," and briefly is suntamos, "for we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." So I want you to notice that Tertullus is pleading to be heard, and he says, I don't want to detain you any further, detain enkopto. And then he says, please hear us briefly, suntamos. Suntamos, tome is a cut, right? So this, just hear us briefly. It's briefly because it's about being cut short. So he says, I'm not trying to hinder you. I'll cut this short, but let me tell you about this guy who's turning the world upside down, and someone must put a stop to him. So it strengthens the notion that our word of the week, enkopto, is about a brief hindrance, about a temporary thwarting of something. I'm not trying to hinder your efforts, Judge. Give me a second, I'll cut it short. I just need to tell you what a horrible, terrible guy this Paul is and how we have to put a stop to his efforts to spread the gospel because he's turning the world upside down. Finally, we're going to look at a self-imposed thwarting. This is in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. I want to look at that little last bit at the end, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Eis to me en koptesthai tas prosukas humon. So tas prosukas hemon, your prayers, the prayers of you, plural. And then we get this phrase at the beginning. It's a preposition, eis, with an infinitive, in this case a negated infinitive, me enkoptesthai, not hindered, and then it has the article in front of it. When we get an infinitive governed by a preposition with the article, in this case with the preposition eis, we treat it like a subjunctive clause. In order that, or so that, it's a purpose clause, for the purpose that your prayers, right, tas prosukas humon, your prayers should not be hindered. So he says, if you're hard-hearted, your condition, if you don't treat your wives correctly, your condition will thwart your prayers, will thwart your connection to God. So go back and read verses 1 through 6, and you'll see that the whole passage is about structuring good relation between husband and wife, and how a bad relation between husband and wife will thwart the efforts of a good relation between self and God. So, enkopto, our word of the week, I thwart or I hinder, comes from digging trenches in the road or the street to prevent your enemies from advancing, and it's always dealing with some religious element to some extent, right? We see that in all of the verses, even that Acts, the passage from Acts, ultimately the story is about keeping Paul from continuing to share the gospel. So, enkopto, I thwart, I hinder. Great word. Plenty of examples for you to look up on your own time. Don't forget to go back and read Romans 15:22. And until next time, charis kairene humin, grace and peace to you.